Every double moon, a blue-skinned guardian appears to fight off predators around my isolated shack. She never speaks, never explains why she keeps saving me. Tonight she finally reached my porch, badly wounded after tearing a monster apart with her bare hands. Now I'm tending her injuries, wondering what kind of being would risk everything for a stranger hiding from his past. The twin moons lock into alignment, and the forest changes. The air grows cold. The normal night sounds vanish, replaced by a predatory silence that unnerves him more than any noise. This is when the hunters emerge from their dens drawn by the celestial shift. Darren's life now operates on this brutal timetable. He marks his calendar not by days but by these events. 7 double moons a year, 7 cycles of barricading his door, of checking his handmade weapons and waiting. The safety in between feels less like peace and more like the slow draining of a timer. His spears and traps, laboriously carved from local wood and stone, have proven useless against these creatures. They have evolved on this world, and he is just a transient, a soft-bodied intruder with inadequate tools. They move too fast, think too strategically. He survives through distance, not combat. He measures his existence by the increasing weariness after each encounter. The attacks leave him with less sleep, fewer resources, and more splinters in his palms from reinforcing the shack's walls. This structure, his only refuge, feels thinner each time. The wooden planks are the only thing separating his breathing from the grinding mandibles and claws outside. He knows he cannot last. Each cycle deepens his isolation, tightens the knot of guilt in his chest. He is not just hiding from the creatures, he is hiding from himself. The blue figure is the only anomaly in this pattern. She appears only during the double moon, always at the height of the attack. She never speaks, never acknowledges him. He has watched her from the window, a flash of cobalt in the darkness, moving with impossible speed and strength. Her interventions are swift and violent, and then she is gone. He cannot explain her. He has tried to find reason in it, some logic to her appearances, but there is none he can see. Her arrival breaks the rhythm tonight. She does not vanish into the trees after the fight. She staggers onto his porch, bloodied and near collapse, leaving a trail of blue across the wooden planks. For the first time, the cycle of attack and temporary safety has been interrupted by something new. Her presence forces a question he has buried. Why would anyone intervene for him? Why would a stranger risk herself for a man who chose exile, who lives wrapped in his own failure? The pattern is broken, and with it the certainty of his solitude. Beneath a loose floorboard near his bunk, a locked metal chest holds a folded Alliance uniform. The fabric is still crisp. The rank insignia remains polished, though untouched. He has not opened it since arriving on this world. That uniform represents a life he chose to leave behind, yet its memory shapes every one of his actions in exile. His survival skills are sharp, a product of military training. He builds efficient traps, purifies water with methodical care, and maintains his weapons with a soldier's discipline. But these practical actions exist in stark contrast to the internal damage. His mind is a landscape of fractures. The man who can field strip a weapon in total darkness cannot stop his hands from shaking when he remembers. He left everything after a single mission. He walked away from his rank, his unit, and his identity. There was no ceremony, no honorable discharge. He simply disappeared, using his knowledge to vanish into the furthest reaches of charted space. He chose a world with no colonies, no outposts, and a brutal environment that would punish any mistake. It felt like the appropriate sentence. The nightmares come without fail. They are not vague terrors, but precise recreations. He feels the vibration of the dropship through his boots. He hears the crackle of the comm in his ear. He sees the scope's crosshairs aligning. He wakes, gasping, the echo of the explosion still ringing in his skull, the smell of ionized air and burned earth clinging to his memory. The shack offers no escape from this. This level of isolation is a known behavioral response to severe combat trauma. The mind, overloaded by violence and responsibility, seeks environments with absolute control and minimal variables. A lone outpost on a hostile world provides a perverse kind of safety. The external threats are predictable compared to the internal ones. His meticulous camp maintenance is a ghost of his former military discipline. He arranges his tools with precise alignment. He inventories his supplies daily. The woodpile is stacked with geometric perfection. These are the rituals of a man trying to impose order on a universe that has proven chaotic beyond comprehension. It is a futile attempt to control the one thing he could not. The silence of the forest is filled with the weight of command. In the quiet, he hears the questions he was asked and the orders he gave. He feels the heavy responsibility of lives depending on his judgment. That weight is a constant pressure, a gravity that pins him to this place. He is serving a self-imposed sentence for a failure of leadership. The number 73 is his personal hell. It is not an abstract statistic. It is the precise count of civilian deaths from that mission. 22 of them were children. The official report called it an intelligence failure and absolved him of blame. The absolution meant nothing. He carries the number like a brand. It is the first thing he thinks of in the morning and the last thing he remembers at night. This guilt is the real prison. The shack in the wilderness are just its walls. The predators outside are a distraction from the one that lives inside him. He did not come here to hide from the universe. He came here to be consumed by it, to let the elements or the creatures execute the sentence he felt he deserved. His exile is not an escape. It is an extended confession. Blood stains the wooden planks where she made her stand. The blue is startling against the weathered gray timber, a color he has never seen in any wound. She collapsed just outside his door, her body curled around a deep gash in her side. The fight must have ended mere steps from his threshold. Her arrival shatters the fragile routine of his exile. For cycles, he has watched her from a distance, a swift and silent protector who vanished with the twin moons. Now she lies on his porch unmoving. This is not the clean, quick intervention he has witnessed before. This is a desperate final stand. The violence of it is written across his small clearing. The injuries tell a story of a fight far more brutal than the usual skirmishes. He finds her surrounded by dismembered predator parts. Claws the length of his forearm lie severed near her boots. Chunks of chitinous armor are scattered like broken pottery. The smell of torn flesh and alien musk hangs thick in the air. She did not just drive them off. She dismantled them. Her blue skin is a map of trauma. Deep lacerations cross her torso and arms, weeping that same vivid fluid. Strange bruising patterns bloom beneath the surface like dark ink spreading in water. They form geometric shapes, unnatural and precise, suggesting internal damage his human eyes cannot assess. One of her arms lies at an angle that makes his own shoulder ache in sympathy. His military field medicine training takes over. The confusion, the shock, the million questions, they all recede. His hands move on their own, checking for a pulse. He finds one, a rhythmic thrum against his fingertips that is too fast, too deep. It feels less like a heartbeat and more like a powerful engine idling roughly. He focuses on the immediate tasks. Stop the bleeding, assess the damage, stabilize the patient. The protocol is a familiar comfort, a script from his old life. Most documented first contact scenarios begin with an act of aid, not a declaration of war. The offering of medical assistance is a universal language, a gesture that transcends biology or intent. It is a risk, placing oneself in a vulnerable position to demonstrate a lack of threat. He is now an active participant in that silent dialogue. Her equipment is unlike any alliance issue he has ever seen. The material of her garments feels both flexible and impossibly tough, like woven metal. It has torn in places, revealing the complex musculature beneath. A small device on her wrist glows with a soft pulsing light, its purpose unknown. The technology is clearly advanced, its design principles alien and efficient. This silent savior now depends on the very skills he thought he had abandoned. The man who came here to die is now fighting to keep another being alive. The dynamic has completely reversed. He is no longer the helpless beneficiary of her protection. He is the caretaker, using the knowledge of a past he hates to preserve a future he cannot understand. The soldier he buried is what she needs most. The cloth in his hand comes away clean from a gash that should be weeping. The blue blood has already clotted, forming a thick, rubbery seal over the injury. He watches the edges of the wound. They seem to pull together with a faint, almost imperceptible motion, like a time lapse of a healing scab compressed into minutes. This is not normal. Her biology defies every medical text he ever studied. He probes a deep laceration on her arm, expecting to find torn muscle. Instead, his fingers meet resistance that feels wrong. The tissue beneath her skin possesses an extraordinary density, like dense packed fiber. It reminds him of the feeling of thick, seasoned rope beneath a synthetic coating. He watches as a bruise, a deep violet bloom against the blue, visibly lightens its hue as he stares. The discoloration recedes, fading from the center outward. His standard issue medical kit is useless. The antiseptics, the coagulants, the sutures, they are all designed for human tissue and human responses. Applying a clotting agent to a wound that has already sealed itself feels absurd. The biomonitor's readings are gibberish, reporting heart rates and metabolic levels that would indicate a human subject in catastrophic failure. He closes the kit. Its contents represent a paradigm of knowledge that is suddenly completely obsolete. Theories exist about advanced species developing redundant biological systems, multiple organs performing the same function, accelerated cellular regeneration, nervous systems that can reroute around damage. These were abstract concepts in xenobiology briefings, speculative models for creatures no human had ever truly encountered. He is looking at the practical application. Her body is not just healing. It is rebuilding itself in real time. Using processes he can observe but not comprehend, he improvises. Battlefield experience takes over. He uses clean water to wash away the dirt and alien gore from her skin. He applies pressure to the one wound that is still seeping, using a folded bandage, though he suspects the pressure is more symbolic than necessary. He checks her airway, stabilizes her neck. He treats the symptoms he can understand, the structural damage, and ignores the physiological miracles happening beneath his hands. He works with a focused calm, the kind that only emerges when protocol fails and instinct becomes the only guide. She does not stir. She does not cry out. Her silence is not the emptiness of unconsciousness, but a profound, focused endurance. Her body is fighting a war on a cellular level, and she is enduring it with a stillness that feels intentional. This is not a passive state. It is an active internal struggle, and her quiet is a testament to an immense will. He understands this kind of silence. It is the silence of a soldier compartmentalizing pain to complete a mission. This act of care becomes their first true interaction. They are not exchanging words or gestures. They are exchanging vulnerability and trust. He is learning her physical language, the slight tension in her jaw, the minute twitch of a finger, the rhythm of her strange breathing. She is, in her stillness, communicating a tolerance for his touch, an acceptance of his aid. It is a conversation built on the shared ground of injury and survival, a dialogue more honest than any spoken greeting could ever be. He is no longer just a man helping a stranger. He is a medic learning to read a new text, written in flesh and resilience. Her eyelids opened. The color was wrong. Silver irises focused on his face with an unsettling clarity. There was no blur of waking confusion. Her gaze was immediate and sharp, locking onto his own. The silent guardian was gone. In her place lay a person, an intelligence watching him from a bed of makeshift bandages. He held his breath. His hand, which had been adjusting a compress, went still. This was the moment. Her first movements would tell him everything. She could be a friend. She could be a threat. Her body, even injured, held a latent power he had witnessed tearing creatures apart. She could end him before he could reach his weapon. Her eyes left his face. They swept the cabin. He watched her take inventory of the space. Her gaze moved over the rough-hewn table, the stacked firewood, the dried meat hanging from the ceiling. It paused on his plasma rifle leaning against the far wall. It measured the distance to the door. She was assessing her environment with a soldier's calm precision, calculating threats and opportunities. She looked back at him. Her expression showed no fear, no aggression, only a deep analytical calm. Her body remained relaxed on the pallet. She made no move to sit up, to defend herself, or to attack. This passive observation was more disconcerting than a hostile gesture would have been. It suggested a confidence that needed no posturing. Initial contact between unknown intelligences often hinges on these first nonverbal exchanges. A gesture of peace, an offering, a shared moment of vulnerability can set the course for all future interaction. A single act of aggression can doom it. They were building the foundation of their relationship right now, word by word, glance by glance. She raised her hand slowly, her movement deliberate and unthreatening. She pointed a finger at the wooden cup of water beside him. She looked from the cup to his face, waiting. The intent was clear. She wanted him to name it. He said the word, water. She watched his mouth form the syllables. She pointed at the wall of the cabin. Wood, he said. She pointed at the rifle. He hesitated. That one carried weight. Weapon, she absorbed this. Then she pointed at her own chest. She spoke a single soft syllable. It sounded like Rava. It held a musical quality, a vibration that felt alien to his ear. She was giving him her name, he understood. He pointed to his own chest. Darren, she repeated it. Her voice shaped the two syllables with careful precision. Darren. The sound of his name in her mouth was strange, yet unmistakable. It was an acknowledgement, a recognition. This simple exchange of identities broke a silence that had lasted for years. It was more than just learning what to call each other. It was an agreement to communicate. It was a pact of mutual recognition between two beings from different worlds, both hiding on the same remote planet. The soldier and the guardian were gone. Now there was only Darren and Rava, starting a conversation on the floor of a lonely shack. She spoke her people's name with careful, learned words. The term felt ancient in her mouth, a sound that carried the weight of generations. Inkai, she said, watching his face for recognition. There was none. The word meant nothing to him, but its implication meant everything. Her existence here on his floor was proof. Humanity was not alone in the universe. They had never been alone. Her people lived secretly across countless worlds, she explained. They moved through human society unseen, their presence as constant and unnoticed as the air. Earth itself hosted Inkai observers in its major cities, its remote villages, its spaceports. They were integrated, embedded. They watched and they recorded, a silent audience to the whole of human history. Their surveillance was not malicious, she insisted. It was study. It was assessment. Their biological abilities defied human comprehension. The rapid healing he had witnessed was merely the surface. She described cellular control that allowed them to alter their density, to withstand extreme environmental pressures, to process information at speeds that made their perception of time fundamentally different. Their strength was not just muscular. It was a function of a unique bioenergy that coursed through their bodies, a force they could channel for regeneration or, if necessary, for combat. The form he saw was a disguise. The blue skin, the silver eyes, the humanoid shape. It was a chosen adaptation, a sophisticated biological cloak. Their true form remained hidden, a state she described as their essential resonance, a concept he could not fully grasp. It was not a form meant for human eyes or human understanding. This facade was a survival strategy, not a deception. To reveal their true nature would be to invite panic, persecution, or worse. Secrecy was their primary defense mechanism, the core tenet that had allowed their species to observe and endure. Cultures across Earth told stories of hidden people, myths of fey folk living in hollow hills, of river spirits guarding sacred waters, of shadowy figures seen from the corner of the eye. These were fractured glimpses, the human mind struggling to process accidental encounters with the Inkai. The stories were the evidence, scattered across continents and centuries, of a presence humanity sensed but could never confirm. Her people were the source of 1,000 legends, the truth behind the campfire tales. This revelation reframed everything. Human history was no longer a solitary climb from ignorance to the stars. It was a performance watched by an unseen audience. Every war, every discovery, every act of art or brutality had occurred under the silent, studying gaze of another intelligence. The universe was not an empty void waiting for human expansion. It was a crowded neighborhood where humanity had been living, oblivious in a house of glass. The isolation he felt on this remote world was a microcosm of a larger, species-wide solitude that had just been shattered. He was not just a man learning about an alien. He was a representative of his entire species, finally being introduced to the neighbors. A silent war tears her people apart across worlds. Rava describes the conflict with a flat tone, her words carrying the weight of an ancient, bitter truth. The Inkai civilization, once unified in its purpose of observation, has fractured along a deep ideological fault line. The war is not fought on open battlefields with massed armies. It is a shadow conflict, waged in the hidden places between human settlements in the uncharted voids of space on remote worlds like this one. It is a struggle that consumes her people from within, and humanity remains entirely unaware of the conflict being fought over its future. Two factions now define the Inkai. Their division is absolute. One group, to which Rava belongs, continues to advocate for the old ways of study and patient observation. They believe in the possibility of a future built on mutual understanding and eventual, careful coexistence. They see humanity's potential for compassion, for art, for growth. They argue that contact, when it finally comes, must be a meeting of equals, not a conquest. The other faction seeks a different path. Led by a figure she names as Voranth, They view humanity as a chaotic, dangerous, and ultimately inferior species. They see human history as a chronicle of violence and waste. Vorinth's followers believe the only logical course is domination. They argue for revealing their true power, not as a gesture of peace, but as a display of absolute authority. They want to control human development, to harness its resources and populations for Inkai purposes. Their vision is one of subjugation, a silent, permanent rule from the shadows. This civil war has remained perfectly hidden from human awareness. Its battles leave no public debris, create no news reports. The evidence is scrubbed clean. A vanished starship crew here, an unexplained energy surge in a remote sector there. These are the only whispers of the conflict. The war is fought with advanced technology and biological agents that leave no trace recognizable to human forensics. The greatest war in the galaxy is happening in humanity's blind spot. Like all fundamental conflicts, this one is rooted in ideology. It is a classic schism between isolationism and engagement, between fear and hope, between the desire for control and the belief in organic growth. The fracture runs through every level of Inkai society, dividing families, severing communications networks, and turning once trusted colleagues into mortal enemies. The very secrecy that protected them for millennia now prevents any clear resolution, trapping them in a perpetual clandestine stalemate. Rava's presence on this world is her faction's answer. She is not just a guardian. She is an operative on a specific mission. Her objective was to observe a human under extreme duress, isolated from his own kind. She was to assess the core of human resilience, to see if the capacity for honor and connection could persist even in the deepest solitude. Her repeated interventions were not random acts of mercy. They were part of the experiment, a test to see how a human would respond to unexplained salvation. Her mission was to gather data to prove that coexistence was not just an idealistic dream, but a strategic possibility. She was fighting the war with information, trying to provide her people with a reason to choose hope over fear. Rava's voice was quiet, but the words struck him with physical force. The truth was not that the Alliance was ignorant. The truth was far worse. The highest levels of his own government had known about the Inkai for decades. They were not observers of this hidden war. They were active, complicit participants. His military, the institution whose values he thought he had betrayed with his failure, had itself betrayed every principle it publicly claimed to uphold. The uniform in his locked chest felt like a lie. The oaths he had taken felt hollow. The trust he had placed in his command structure curdled in his gut. They had made him a soldier in a conflict he never knew existed, fighting for a cause that was never his own. The Alliance had cut a deal with Vorinth's faction. It was a black project, buried so deep that only a handful of people would ever know its full scope. In exchange for advanced weapons technology and genetic modification expertise, Vorinth provided the Alliance with something it desperately wanted: soldiers. Inkai soldiers. They were modified, weaponized, and deployed as bioprotectors against the Alliance's enemies. These were the tools his government used when deniable, overwhelming force was required. They had outsourced their most brutal warfare to a faction of a hidden alien species. Weapon development programs on black site worlds integrated captured Inkai technology. Energy weapons based on their bioenergy principles, cloaking devices that mimicked their adaptive camouflage. The Alliance was not just using the Inkai, it was strip mining their science for a tactical edge, treating an entire civilization as a resource to be exploited. The technological leap was immense, but the moral cost was absolute. The Alliance saw the Inkai not as people, but as assets. They were biological hardware, tools to be upgraded, deployed, and discarded. This perspective allowed for atrocities to be framed as procurement issues. The ethical considerations that should have governed interspecies contact were ignored in favor of cold strategic calculation. The humanity they were sworn to protect was being defended using methods that stripped humanity from another species. This pattern of covert, unethical programs is a recurring theme in military history. Governments consistently prioritize perceived strategic advantage over transparency and ethics, operating in the shadows where accountability vanishes. These projects thrive on secrecy, on the assumption that the ends will always justify the means no matter how dark those means become. These operations were a direct violation of numerous interstellar treaties. Agreements on non-interference, on the ethical treatment of sentient life forms, on the prohibition of certain classes of biological weapons. The Alliance was breaking them all. The laws meant to prevent galactic conflict were being shredded by the very government that helped write them. They were playing with fire in a universe full of kindling. The realization hit Darren like a body blow. His mission, the one that broke him, was not a simple intelligence failure. The intel that identified a Voranth stronghold in a civilian area was likely part of this deeper collaboration, a piece of data manipulated or misinterpreted within the context of a war he knew nothing about. The orders he received, the mixed signals from command, it all made a terrible, horrific sense. The 73 civilian deaths were not just a tragic mistake. They were collateral damage in a hidden war his own government had secretly joined. The guilt that had driven him into exile was not solely his to bear. It was a weight shared by the faceless architects of this conspiracy, men and women who had used his unit, his judgment, and his trigger finger to advance an agenda he would have found abhorrent. He had been a pawn in a game whose rules he never understood, and the cost of that game had been measured in the lives of the people he was supposed to protect. His failure was not his alone. It was a symptom of a much deeper, more systemic corruption. He told her the story of the mission that ended his career. The words came out flat and heavy like stones dropped into a deep well. This was the core of his guilt, the wound that had never closed. He had carried the memory alone for years, a weight that bent his shoulders and haunted his every silent moment. The setup was straightforward, at least on the surface. Intel identified a stronghold belonging to Voranth's faction, hidden within a civilian residential sector. The data packets showed schematics, heat signatures, comms traffic. It looked solid. His team was a standard unit, well-trained, experienced. They were given a clear, direct order. A surgical strike. Quick and clean. The objective was to eliminate a high-value target and destabilize Voranth's operations in that sector. But there were mixed signals. Things that didn't add up if you looked closely. The civilian presence was higher than expected for that time of cycle. The target's own comm patterns were erratic, unusual for a high-level operative. Some of the heat signatures were wrong, too small, clustered in ways that suggested families, not soldiers. He raised these concerns with command. The response was immediate and absolute. The intel was verified. The window was closing. The order stood. He was a soldier. He followed the order. The attack killed 73 civilians. 22 of them were children. The explosives tore through a community shelter, not a military bunker. The strike was not surgical. It was a slaughter. He watched it happen from his vantage point, the scope of his rifle showing him the truth a fraction of a second before the shockwave hit. The intel was catastrophically wrong. The stronghold was a fiction. They had fired on a group of people hiding from the very conflict he was now a part of. Faulty intelligence is a known, documented cause of civilian casualties in combat zones. The fog of war obscures details, and data can be manipulated or misinterpreted. Soldiers are trained to trust their chain of command, to rely on the intelligence they are given. That trust is the foundation of military operations. When that foundation is built on lies or errors, the consequences are borne by those who pull the triggers and those who stand in the wrong place. The Alliance convened a tribunal. They reviewed the data streams, the comm logs, his own report. The official finding was that he had acted on verified intelligence and followed lawful orders. He was absolved of all responsibility. The failure was systemic, not personal. They offered him counseling, a new posting, a promotion. They treated it as a tragic operational hazard. He could not accept their absolution. It felt like a lie. The official narrative was clean and bloodless. His memory was not. He could still see the faces in the dust. He could still hear the silence after the explosion. The weight of those 73 lives was his to carry, not the Alliance's to dismiss. Their forgiveness meant nothing because it did not change the facts on the ground. This guilt became his compass. It pointed him away from everything he had known. It drove him to the farthest, most desolate reaches of charted space. He chose a world where the environment was punishment enough, where the constant fight for survival might, for a few moments at a time, drown out the memory of what he had done. His exile was not an escape. It was the only sentence that fit the crime. He left to bury the soldier and to be buried in turn. The ground was hard-packed where he began to dig. His hands worked at the familiar spot just beyond the tree line, a place he had marked in his mind but never visited. The shovel bit into the soil with a sound that felt like a betrayal. He was unburying the one thing he swore he would leave to rust. He retrieved the military equipment he had tried to abandon. The vacuum-sealed crate came out of the earth with a groan of protesting metal. The dirt fell away from its surface, revealing the Alliance insignia, stamped into the reinforced polymer. The sight of it made his stomach clench. These weapons were the physical remnants of the past he had worked so hard to forget. The very identity he had come to this world to shed. A plasma rifle, a case of tactical explosives, and a full set of combat body armor saw daylight for the first time in years. Each piece was an artifact from a life he had renounced. The rifle stock still fit the curve of his shoulder with a sickening familiarity. The weight of the body armor was a pressure he had not missed. He ran a hand over the cool segmented plates and the memories surfaced unbidden, the smell of ozone from a charged plasma cartridge, the echoed shouts of his fire team, the vibration of a dropship's engines. The gear was not inanimate. It was a catalog of his former self. The equipment remained perfectly functional. The crate's preservation seals had held against the planet's moisture and temperature swings. The rifle's power cell showed a full charge. The explosives were stable, their primers intact. The armor's systems booted up with a soft hum, its heads-up display flickering to life. The advanced technology of the Alliance had endured the neglect, a testament to its ruthless efficiency. It was all still lethal. This attachment to military hardware is a common psychological threat among soldiers who leave service. The gear represents more than just tools. It is a security blanket, a tangible link to a structured world of clear objectives and defined roles. It is the one piece of a chaotic past that can be controlled, maintained, and understood. He had buried it not to dispose of it, but to quarantine it. He knew it was there, a secret he kept from himself. These weapons might be their only chance against the coming threats. Rava's description of the enhanced hybrids painted a picture of a foe his spears and traps could not stop. The plasma rifle offered firepower. The explosives could shape the battlefield. The armor might deflect a claw meant to eviscerate him. This was not about offense. It was about creating a threshold of survival they could defend. Accepting these tools meant accepting the soldier he had tried to kill. To pick up the rifle was to pick up the responsibility, the training, and the guilt that came with it. He could not use the weapons without becoming the man who knew how to use them. The exile was over. The hiding was finished. He looked from the gear to Rava, standing silent and resolute by the cabin. The choice was clear. He chose to fight again rather than hide. He would use the tools of his old life to protect the possibility of a new one. The decision settled on him not as a burden but as a grim and necessary clarity. He began checking each piece of equipment with a methodical precision that felt both foreign and deeply familiar. The soldier was back. This time he knew exactly what he was fighting for. Rava described the hybrids hunting them. Her voice held a grim precision. The things coming for them were not the wild predators of Veltris. They were something far more calculated. The enemy they faced was the pinnacle of advanced biological warfare, a project born from Voranth's ruthless pragmatism. They represented a fundamental breach of natural law, a weaponized fusion meant to end the conflict through overwhelming force. These creatures far exceeded normal Inkai capabilities. Voranth's modifications were profound. He had spliced their base DNA with traits from aggressive Earth predators, then integrated that unstable biological matter with advanced technology. The result was a hybrid possessing greater physical strength, heightened intelligence, and a cruelty that felt engineered rather than instinctual. They were not animals. They were hunters built for a single purpose. Their design incorporated metal implants fused directly to blue skin, their natural eyes replaced with glowing red sensors that could see in spectrums beyond human or Inkai perception. They were part flesh, part machine, and entirely lethal. Their coordination suggested sophisticated pack hunting strategies. They did not attack as individuals. They moved as a unit, communicating and flanking with a tactical intelligence that mirrored a trained military squad. This was not the mindless aggression of the local fauna. It was the application of combat doctrine to a biological weapon. Their ability to adapt to resistance in real time made them unpredictable. They learned from each engagement, evolving their tactics to counter defensive measures. These hunters specifically tracked Rava and her allies. They were Voranth's personal answer to her defiance, a tailored solution designed to eliminate the most persistent thorn in his side. Their deployment was a clear message. His pursuit was not a broader military campaign. It was a targeted assassination mission. Her existence and her proof of alliance collusion represented a threat so significant that it demanded the creation of a new class of soldier. The creation of hybrid organisms often leads to unpredictable and volatile traits. Merging disparate genetic templates can produce unforeseen strengths, but also profound instabilities. The psychological profile of such a being is a blank slate. Foranth had not just built a better predator. He had created a conscious, intelligent weapon with a drive to hunt and no moral compass to guide it. Its cruelty was a feature, not a bug. 6 of these enhanced hybrids were now converging on their location. The data from Rava's internal sensors was clear. They were moving fast, closing the distance with a purpose that left no doubt about their target. The coming fight would be a brutal test of their combined capabilities. It would pit Darren's reclaimed military training and advanced weaponry against Foranth's biological engineering. It would test Rava's Inkai resilience against a corrupted version of her own people's potential. They were no longer just defending a shack. They were standing against the physical manifestation of a hidden war, a war that was now knocking directly on their door. The fight would determine if a soldier's resolve and a guardian's strength could withstand an enemy designed in a lab to break them both. They began turning the cabin into a fortress. The modest shelter was now the focal point of their defense. Its wooden walls, once a thin barrier against the wilderness, were about to become a final line against a calculated assault. Every preparation was a calculated risk, every reinforcement a small bet against overwhelming odds. They understood these defenses might not hold. Enhanced opponents would test every weakness, exploit every flaw in their plan. He dug pitfalls along the main approach routes. The holes were deep, their bottoms lined with sharpened stakes carved from local hardwood. He strung tripwires between trees, connecting them to crude explosive charges made from his recovered Alliance gear. These were not meant to kill. They were meant to maim, to confuse, to delay. They would channel the attackers into predetermined paths, turning the forest into a lethal funnel that led straight to their door. He reinforced the natural choke points. A narrow gap between 2 large rock formations became a kill zone, its entrance partially blocked with felled timber. The path leading up to the porch was strewn with caltrops fashioned from bent nails and sharp stones. He used every available material, rope, wire, spare metal, broken tools, to create obstacles. It was a haphazard array of defenses, but each one added a precious second to their response time, a slight tilt in the balance of survival. Rava revealed her full physical capabilities during the work. She did not simply help. She transformed the effort. Where he struggled to move a heavy log, she lifted it with a single fluid motion, her muscles coiling with a density that seemed to defy the object's weight. Her senses, now fully engaged, detected shifts in the wind, distant cracks of twigs, scents carried from kilometers away. She was not just building defenses. She was mapping the approaching threat in real time, her body tuned to frequencies of danger he could not perceive. This comprehensive defensive preparation is a documented factor in improving survival odds against superior numbers. A fortified position forces attackers to pay a price for every meter gained. It disrupts their momentum, breaks their coordination, and provides the defenders with critical moments to react. Their work was not just about building walls. It was about constructing time itself, creating pockets of safety within the coming chaos. Their collaboration blended human and Inkai tactics into a new strategy. His military expertise shaped the overall plan: fields of fire, overlapping coverage, fallback positions. Her innate understanding of terrain and predator behavior informed the trap placement and ambush points. She could sense where an enemy would instinctively move, and he could design a kill zone to meet it there. It was a partnership of calculation and instinct, each compensating for the other's blind spots. The cabin ceased to be a refuge. It became both refuge and killing ground. The small space was now a hardened stronghold, its windows barricaded, its door reinforced with crossbeams. Supplies were stockpiled inside. Weapons were positioned at key firing points. It was a place to make a final stand, a box canyon of their own making. They were not hiding within it. They were daring the enemy to come and try to take it. This partnership transformed his exile into a state of purposeful defense. The man who had come to this world to surrender was now actively preparing to fight for it. The guilt that had frozen him was now a fuel for action. He was no longer a solitary prisoner serving a sentence. He was a soldier again with a partner, a position, and a reason to hold the line. The waiting was over. The forest was quiet, but it was a silence full of promise and threat. 6 shadows moved through the trees. They did not lurch or scramble like the native predators. They flowed between the trunks with a liquid, predatory grace, their movements synchronized. The enhanced hunters initiated their assault not with a roar, but with a calculated silence. They fanned out, a well-rehearsed maneuver that spoke of drilled discipline. Their tactics revealed an intelligence that went beyond animal instinct. This was not a hunt driven by hunger. It was an execution. 2 peeled off to the left, moving to flank the cabin's eastern side. Another pair broke right, seeking a blind spot near the rock formation. The remaining 2 advanced straight on, testing the defensive perimeter. They probed the tree line, their glowing red sensors scanning the ground for traps. One triggered a tripwire. Instead of panicking, it backpedaled with cool precision, avoiding the subsequent blast that shredded the air. They were learning the layout of the defenses in real time. Darren fired from the roof. The plasma rifle bucked against his shoulder, its discharge casting a brief, violent light across the clearing. A bolt of energy struck the lead hybrid in the chest, staggering it. The smell of ozone and burned flesh filled the air. Below, Rava engaged. She moved with her own terrifying speed, meeting a flanker head-on. Her fist connected with a sound like a hammer on stone. Blue energy crackled around the impact point. The hybrid reeled back, its mechanical eye flickering. The creatures adapted instantly. The ones on the flanks changed their approach, using the thicker tree cover for concealment. The heavily armored one Darren had hit lowered its stance, presenting a smaller target. They abandoned direct charges for feints and diversions. One would draw fire while another advanced from a new angle. Their coordination was seamless, a product of communication that had to be technological. They were not just a pack. They were a networked combat unit. Intelligent predators learn during a hunt. They observe, they analyze, they adjust their strategies to overcome resistance. These hybrids were the pinnacle of that concept, engineered for maximum adaptability. Each failed attack provided them with new data. Each defensive measure was cataloged and countered. Their intelligence made them unpredictable. A plan that worked once would not work a second time. Their coordination suggested sophisticated communication abilities. They moved without audible signals, their actions perfectly timed. When one found a weakness, the others knew instantly. When Rava engaged one, 2 others shifted to support it without hesitation. This was not the simple pack mentality of wolves. It was the integrated response of a hive mind or a squad, linked by a silent comms network. They fought as a single entity with 6 bodies. The hybrids proved far more dangerous than anticipated. Their resilience was shocking. The plasma burn on the lead hybrid's chest was already sealing over with a glossy, synthetic-looking scar tissue. Their strength matched Rava's own enhanced capabilities. The defense plan, so carefully constructed, began to unravel under the pressure of their relentless, adaptive assault. The traps were triggered and bypassed. The choke points were tested and overcome. The cabin, their fortress, started to feel like a trap itself, its walls becoming a cage as the circle of hunters tightened. The battle was no longer about holding the line. It was about surviving the next 30 seconds. The largest hybrid stopped its advance. It did not growl or charge. It stood its ground, and a sound emerged from its throat that was not its own. The voice was a distorted approximation of speech, a grating overlay of mechanical noise and a familiar, calculated tone. The lead creature was delivering a message, a vessel for the consciousness of their true enemy. Voranth was speaking through it, his will projected across the void to this remote world. The voice called him the failure returned to finish his mission. The words struck Darren with the force of a physical blow. This was not a random insult. It was a precise, targeted assessment. Voranth knew his history. He knew the mission that had broken him, the one that ended with 73 civilian deaths. He knew the exact nature of the guilt that had driven Darren into exile. This was not a fight against mindless monsters. It was a confrontation with an intelligence that had studied him, that understood his deepest weaknesses. This direct reference to his past trauma shook his focus. The plasma rifle felt heavy in his hands. The sounds of the forest, the movement of the other hybrids, it all receded for a second. He was back in the dropship, hearing the comm crackle, feeling the weight of the order. He saw the crosshairs. He heard the explosion. The number 73 echoed in his skull. The psychological wound, so carefully buried, was torn open. His grip on the present moment faltered. The creature specifically targeted his psychological wounds. It spoke of the civilian casualties of the children. It used language designed to maximize his self-blame, to make him question his every action. This was a classic tactic of psychological warfare, a documented method for reducing an opponent's combat effectiveness. By attacking the mind, an enemy can create hesitation, induce panic, and break the will to fight. A soldier haunted by his past is a soldier already half defeated. This deeply personal attack suggested an overwhelming level of intelligence gathering. Voranth had not just sent killers. He had sent assassins armed with intimate knowledge. They knew about the mission, the guilt, the exile. They knew about the uniform buried in the chest, the nightmares, the solitary rituals. They knew everything. This was not a random encounter. It was a meticulously planned strike aimed at the core of his identity. The enemy knew everything about them. This realization settled over the battlefield like a cold fog. Their defenses, their preparations, their partnership, none of it was a secret. Voranth had been watching, learning, waiting for the right moment to apply pressure to the exact points that would cause the most damage. The battle was no longer a matter of tactics and firepower. It was a personal vendetta, a conflict that reached back through time to a moment of catastrophic failure. The hybrid was not just a weapon. It was a messenger from a past he could not escape, and it was here to collect a debt he had thought was his alone to pay. The fight was now for his soul as much as for his life. The battle turned in a split second. A flanking hybrid slipped past Darren's field of fire, its movement silent and precise. It came from his blind spot, a shadow detaching itself from the deeper darkness beneath the trees. Its target was clear. It ignored Rava, ignored the defensive positions. It moved straight for the roof for him. Its claws extended, a set of polished metal hooks designed for maximum penetration. Darren's focus was locked on the main assault. He never saw it coming. Rava made her choice. She saw the threat an instant before it struck. There was no time for a shout, no time for a plan. There was only the immediate, undeniable need to protect him. She moved, her body a blur of blue against the night. She did not attack the hybrid. She placed herself directly between its trajectory and Darren's exposed back. She intercepted the killing blow with her own body. It was a decision made without calculation, a pure, instinctual act of sacrifice. The creature's claws tore through her abdomen. The sound was a wet, sickening rip of flesh and fabric. The force of the impact lifted her off her feet. Blue blood sprayed across the wooden shingles of the roof. Her body went rigid for a moment, a silent gasp locked in her throat, and then she collapsed. The hybrid, its attack thwarted, hissed in frustration and recoiled, its claws dripping. The act was so swift, so brutal, it seemed to freeze the night itself. Her sacrifice left Darren alone against the full threat. The other hybrids, sensing a sudden vulnerability, renewed their assault with renewed ferocity. The loss of her combat power was immediate and devastating. The defensive perimeter, which had relied on their combined efforts, now had a massive, bleeding hole in its center. He was isolated on the roof, his protector down, the enemy closing in from all sides. The balance of the fight had irrevocably shifted. This level of protective behavior is a known phenomenon in high-stress bonded pairs. When a deep connection forms between two individuals, the instinct to safeguard the other can override the fundamental drive for self-preservation. The action is not logical. It is biological, emotional, and absolute. It is the ultimate expression of trust and commitment, a willingness to trade one's own survival for that of another. Her act transcended species and personal survival. An Inkai guardian had just given her life for a human soldier. The differences in their biology, their origins, their pasts, none of it mattered in that singular moment of choice. The connection they had forged in the quiet of the cabin, built on medical care and shared confessions, proved stronger than any instinct for self. It was a testament to the fact that bonds are not built on similarity, but on shared experience and mutual respect. Her near-fatal injury triggered a profound transformation in him. The sight of her fallen form, the vivid blue blood stark against the dark wood, broke something open inside him. The careful walls he had built around his guilt, his trauma, his reluctance to fight, they shattered. The emotional shock was physical, A cold, clear rage flooded the empty spaces, burning away the hesitation and the fear. The man who had given up on everything saw the one thing worth fighting for lying broken at his feet. The soldier who gave up found his reason to fight again. It was not for the Alliance. It was not for redemption. It was for her. The plasma rifle felt light in his hands now, an extension of his will. The tactical calculations returned to his mind, sharp and cold. The grief and the fury merged into a single focused purpose. He turned from her body, his eyes finding the hybrid that had struck her down. The exile was over. The morning would come later. Now there was only the fight. Darren became the weapon he buried. The soldier he had tried to leave rotting underground surged to the surface in a cold electric wave. Rava's sacrifice unleashed his suppressed combat instincts, breaking the dam of his self-imposed restraint. The sight of her bleeding out on the roof was the trigger. The guilt, the exile, the careful control, it all vaporized. In its place was a focused, killing clarity. This was no longer a battle for survival. It was revenge. His rage was a double-edged blade. It might save them. It might get them both killed. The emotional surge could sharpen his reflexes, heighten his strength, push him past normal human limits. But it also carried a terrible risk. Anger bypasses caution. It invites recklessness. A single misstep, a second of lost focus, and the remaining hybrids would tear him apart. He was gambling their lives on an emotion he had spent years trying to suppress. He attacked the nearest hybrid with brutal, close-quarters violence. He abandoned the relative safety of the roof, leaping down to meet the creature on the ground. He did not fire his rifle. He used it as a bludgeon, swinging the stock into its sensor array with a crack of breaking glass and metal. The hybrid staggered, its red eye flickering. Darren closed the distance, his movements a fusion of military training and raw, unfiltered anger. His assault was a grim combination of drilled precision and primal fury. He moved with the economy of motion drilled into him by years of combat training. A sidestep to avoid a claw strike, a low sweep to destabilize its footing. But his attacks were fueled by a white-hot need to inflict damage. He did not aim to disable. He aimed to destroy. He targeted the weak points in the creature's design, the visible seams in its armor, the connection points between flesh and machine, the vulnerable knee joint he had seen Rava strike. He fought with the cold efficiency of a soldier and the relentless fury of a man who had lost everything. This temporary combat enhancement comes with a documented psychological cost. Rage can narrow perception, tunnel vision, and eliminate hesitation. It makes a soldier faster, stronger, and more willing to endure pain, but it also shuts down higher reasoning. It trades strategic thought for immediate, overwhelming force. It is a short-term solution that risks long-term consequences. A fighter in this state is a weapon without a safety, dangerous to both the enemy and themselves. He nearly lost himself in the process. The world narrowed to the creature in front of him. The sounds of the other hybrids, the moan of the wind, the coppery smell of blood, it all faded. There was only the impact of his fists, the giving way of synthetic flesh, the satisfying crunch of something breaking. He was not just defeating an enemy. He was exorcising a demon. He was punishing the thing that had hurt her. And in doing so, he was punishing the universe for all of its prior injustices. He was dangerously close to becoming the mindless weapon Voranth had accused him of being. He defeated the creature. It finally collapsed, a twitching heap of broken parts and spilled fluids. The victory felt empty, meaningless. He stood over its body, his chest heaving, his knuckles raw and bleeding. The cold rage began to recede, leaving behind a hollow exhaustion. He had won the fight, but he had done it by embracing the very part of himself he had come to this world to escape. The warrior was back. The cost of his return was the peace he had fought so hard to find. He looked from the dead hybrid to Rava's still form. He had saved himself by becoming the man he hated, and he was not sure if the trade was worth it. Her blue skin lost its vivid hue, fading to a pale, ashen gray. The color drained from her face and limbs, leaving her looking like a statue carved from weathered stone. The life that had animated her with such impossible speed and strength was now ebbing away, leaving a terrifying stillness in its wake. The wound in her abdomen was catastrophic by any human standard. The hybrid's claws had torn through muscle and tissue, causing damage that no field medic could ever hope to repair. The bleeding had slowed, not because of clotting, but because there was simply very little blood left to lose. Darren's medical skills were useless here. His human knowledge of anatomy, his sutures, his coagulants, they were all designed for a different kind of body. He applied pressure to the wound, but his hands felt clumsy and inadequate. He knew he was watching her die, and his training offered no solution. The protocols he depended on had no chapter for this. He was a mechanic trying to fix a starship with a stone hammer. The sense of helplessness was a physical weight on his chest, heavier than any armor. Her breathing became so shallow it was nearly undetectable. He had to place his ear close to her lips to feel the faintest whisper of air. Her chest barely rose and fell. Her pulse when he found it was a slow, deep thrum, like a distant drumbeat from another world. She was slipping away into a state that resembled nothing so much as deep hibernation. Her body temperature dropped significantly, her skin growing cool to the touch. Her limbs became rigid, locked in a strange, paralyzed stillness. A soft internal light began to glow from within her chest. It was a faint bioluminescence, a gentle blue-white radiance that seemed to emanate from her core. The light intensified slightly, pulsing with a slow, steady rhythm that matched the faint beat of her heart. It was not a reflection. It was a light generated by her own body, a visible sign of processes he could not comprehend. The glow spread outward from her torso, tracing the pathways of her major veins with a subtle luminescence, making her look like a map of a strange, star-filled galaxy. She had entered a profound state of suspended animation. Her metabolism seemed to shut down to near-zero levels. Her consciousness was gone, retreated to some deep internal place. This was not sleep. It was a biological shutdown, a last-ditch survival mechanism triggered by injuries that would be instantly fatal to any human. It was a desperate gamble by her body, a final attempt to preserve basic cellular function long enough for a miracle to happen. Some species on Earth enter similar states when faced with extreme environmental stress. Certain frogs can freeze solid and revive. Tardigrades can dehydrate and survive in space. These are last resort measures, biological Hail Marys that trade all higher function for the barest chance of future life. Her body was attempting something far more advanced, a controlled shutdown that could potentially allow for regeneration from damage that looked absolute. This regenerative stasis was her only chance. Her Inkai biology included capabilities far beyond human understanding. Her people possessed a redundant, layered survival system. This deep trance was the final layer, the emergency protocol that activated when all other systems had failed. It was not a guarantee.
Many Inkai who entered this state never woke from it.
The process itself was dangerous, a precarious balancing act on the edge of true death. It was a testament to her species' incredible resilience, but also a reminder of their mortality. Her people could sometimes return from injuries that humans would classify as fatal. This ability was a defining trait of the Inkai, a product of their unique evolution. It allowed them to endure in hostile environments and survive conflicts that would wipe out other species. The stasis gave the body time to marshal its resources, to initiate repairs on a cellular level that required absolute stillness and minimal energy expenditure. It was a slow, painstaking process of rebuilding from the inside out. Darren could only watch and wait. He had done all he could. Now her fate was in the hands of her own extraordinary biology and the sheer force of her will to live. The fighter was gone, replaced by a patient in the most critical of conditions. The cabin was silent except for his own breathing and the faint, glowing light that pulsed from her chest, a tiny star fighting against the overwhelming dark. Her eyes opened, the silver irises focused with an alarming clarity. The regenerative trance had worked. The gray pallor of her skin returned to its normal vivid blue. She sat up, her movements smooth and controlled, as if the near-fatal injury had been nothing more than a brief inconvenience. The urgency in her expression was unmistakable. She had returned from the edge of death with a single, clarified purpose. She reached for a small pack secured to her belt, her fingers moving with a tense precision. From it, she withdrew a data crystal. It was a small polygonal object that shimmered with a soft internal light. She held it out to him. The tension in the room shifted. The immediate threat of the hybrids was replaced by the immense weight of the object in her hand. This small piece of technology contained evidence that could unravel an entire hidden war. The crystal held raw data on the Alliance's clandestine projects with Vorinth. It was a comprehensive record of the collaboration. Schematics for weapons developed from stolen Inkai technology, transcripts of covert meetings between high-ranking officials and Vorinth's emissaries, records of financial transfers, resource allocations, and troop deployments. It was a ledger of betrayal, a detailed account of how his own government had secretly allied itself with a faction dedicated to domination. This evidence proved the conspiracy against both species beyond any doubt. It showed the alliance was not a victim of this hidden conflict, but an active, complicit participant. The information detailed the genetic modification programs, the creation of the enhanced hybrids, the black site laboratories where these atrocities were committed. It provided names, dates, locations. It was the truth, captured in light and code, and it was more dangerous than any weapon. The information could prevent a wider conflict if delivered properly. In the wrong hands, it would be destroyed, its bearers silenced. But if it reached the right people within the Alliance intelligence apparatus, it could be the key to stopping Voranth's human allies and exposing the corruption at the highest levels. It could turn the tide of the Shadow War, preventing it from erupting into open, galactic-scale violence. Whistleblower evidence of this magnitude often changes the course of conflicts. It provides a catalyst for investigation, for public outrage, for legal and political action. It shifts the narrative, forcing the hidden into the light. But its power is entirely dependent on its handling. It must be verified, cross-referenced, and presented in a way that withstands the inevitable attempts to discredit it. The data is a tool, and its impact depends on the skill of the people who wield it. This intelligence requires careful handling to be effective. It cannot be broadcast indiscriminately. It must be delivered directly to analysts and agents who possess the security clearance, the expertise, and, most importantly, the integrity to act on it. The selection of the right recipient is a strategic decision as critical as any battlefield maneuver. A single misstep could see the crystal lost and its bearers eliminated. Rava made it clear the crystal was not meant for them alone. She stated the necessity of delivering it to Alliance intelligence. She believed, despite everything, that not all humans were involved in the conspiracy. She trusted that within the vast, complex machinery of the Alliance, there existed individuals who would recognize the truth and have the courage to act upon it. This belief was the foundation of their new mission. They must bring this crystal to the heart of the very system that had betrayed them. Their personal survival was no longer the primary objective. It had become a component of a larger, far more dangerous mission. They were now couriers of truth, and their journey would take them from the isolation of Veltris directly into the lion's den. The soldier and the guardian were now partners in a desperate attempt to save two species from a war they never asked for. They looked toward the stars beyond Veltris. The sky was a black canvas pricked with distant suns, each one a potential destination or a hidden threat. The view from the cabin's clearing had once felt like a barrier, a declaration of his solitude. Now it felt like an opening, a map of the battles to come. The sense of limitation was gone, replaced by the grim necessity of movement. The fight was no longer on this world. It was out there. The cabin no longer represented safety. Its walls felt thin, its isolation suddenly vulnerable. It was a relic of the life he was leaving behind, a monument to 3 years of running. Every splintered board, every patch on the roof spoke of a man trying to hide from the universe. That man was gone. The soldier had returned, and a soldier understands that a fixed position is only as strong as your ability to leave it. The shack was a point on a map he was ready to burn. Leaving meant facing the universe that broke them. For Darren, it was confronting the Alliance, the institution that had betrayed its own values and used him as a pawn. It was walking back into the bureaucracy and the lies, seeing the faces of commanders who had signed the orders that cost 73 lives. For Rava, it was returning to the hidden war that had torn her people apart, risking exposure and capture to deliver the truth. The journey meant accepting that their pasts were not buried. They were waiting for them. Darren packed his military gear instead of burying it. The plasma rifle went into a reinforced carry case. The body armor was checked for integrity, its systems humming to life. The tactical explosives were secured in a padded container. Each piece was a piece of his history, a tool of the trade he had renounced. Handling them was an act of reclamation. He was not digging up a corpse. He was sharpening a weapon he had chosen to wield again. Rava prepared for travel in her adopted human form. Her blue skin shifted, its pigment softening into a human tone. Her silver eyes darkened to a common brown. The change was not just cosmetic. It was a strategic withdrawal, a retreat into the disguise that had allowed her people to survive. She became someone who could walk through a spaceport without drawing a second glance. It was a necessary deception, a shield for the dangerous journey ahead. They planned their approach to Alliance authorities. The data crystal was the key. They identified a specific contact, a mid-level intelligence analyst with a reputation for integrity and a history of questioning official narratives. Reaching him would require bypassing layers of security, avoiding the watchful eyes of Vorinth's allies within the system. Their strategy was a delicate balance of audacity and caution, a high-stakes gamble with their lives and the crystal as the wager. Leaving isolation requires significant psychological preparation. The mind grows accustomed to the rhythms of solitude, to the control it offers. Re-entering a world of people, of noise, of constant threat, is a shock to the system. Darren had to mentally prepare to see uniforms again, to hear military jargon, to navigate the complex social codes he had abandoned. Rava had to brace for the constant effort of maintaining her human form, for the fear of discovery that would be her constant companion. Their partnership provided the mutual strength needed for the journey. His knowledge of Alliance protocols and military structures complemented her understanding of the hidden conflict and Inkai technology. His caution balanced her resolve. They were two broken pieces that, when joined, created a stronger whole. The trust they had built in the cabin was now the foundation for every decision they would make. They were not going as individuals. They were going as a unit. They chose to face the conspiracy together. The decision was made without ceremony. It was in the way he handed her a power cell for her hidden devices. It was in the way she double-checked the seals on his armor. They had each come to this world alone, driven by guilt and duty. They were leaving it together, driven by a shared purpose that was larger than their individual pain. The fight was no longer about survival or penance. It was about truth. The soldier and the guardian became partners in a larger fight. The man who hid from his past and the being who guarded his present were now allies in a mission that stretched across star systems. Their personal war against the hybrids was over. The galactic war against lies and corruption was just beginning. They shouldered their packs and left the cabin behind, two figures walking away from a past of solitude and into a future of shared purpose, their steps taking them toward the stars and the unknown conflict waiting there. The double moons will return to Veltris. Their light will call the predators, and the hunters sent by Vorinth will follow. The threat is not over. It is a cycle, a rhythm of danger that will continue long after they have left this world. Their fight extends far beyond one remote planet. It stretches to countless unnamed stars, to hidden bases and silent observation posts, to the corridors of power where the conspiracy was born. The conflict is larger than either of them. Some alliances form across the deepest divides. They are built not on shared history but on shared purpose. A human soldier and an Inkai guardian united by guilt and a hidden war step into the greater darkness together.